my wife loves a pneumatic tube. I'm just being honest with you. If we could have a tube, she's like, we should install a tube to go places and send messages. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that idea too. That's probably why we're married.
It was all the pneumatic tubes. It's like these,
all
you
about
mentioned
pneumatic
that,
tubes,
and it was
man.
just like
It's all about hydraulic pneumatic tubes.
We're gonna go into our last topic of the day, and that is all about The Shadow, the 1994 film. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. Again, we talked about this during our remakes, episode, and this is one of the movies where I wasn't sure if they should remake it or not. I didn't know if it warranted one or not. And I'm going to give my thoughts on that again, so I'm going to readdress that question because I didn't really have an answer for it because I had all I remembered is what I saw as a kid, and I remember really liking it as a kid. And even to this day, I watched it earlier today as we're recording this early today. I was on the treadmill, watched the whole thing, and I was like, man, this was fun. This was fun. I still really dug it. So so we're gonna go into some of the good and some of the. I have some bad, but it's only sort of. It's like, okay, it's not. It's criticism, negative criticism, but it's not like it broke anything. And at least in my personal opinion. Anyway, it didn't really nothing that I have that really broke anything. It was just some stuff was hokey, but I'll get into that. First thing I'm going to go into, the score is amazing. The musical score is amazing.
I think it was Jerry Goldsmith, I think.
Yes, Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those movie powerhouse. Gosh, I think he might have did Last of the Mohicans. I think. Oh, actually, the director was Russell Mulcahy, wasn't it? From did the Highlander, original Highlander movie, if I remember correctly. He's actually he's a pretty good actor.
It was
director too. Now I will say this movie, the look of it reminded me of a Sam Raimi film.
It did.
Yeah,
I didn't.
It did because the camera angles, the shots, like Evil Dead 2 and some of the Spider-Man, just how the close-ups were and the framing and the colors, and it reminded me a lot of. In fact, it actually reminded me a lot of the movie Dark Man by Sam Raimi.
Oh okay.
It really did, just because again the zooms and the things and. So what are you going to do? Are you going to start with good or bad?
I'm starting with goods. And like I said, the score was amazing. Jerry Goldsmith. He also did Gremlins, and what else did he do?
I think he did Silverado. I think.
Yeah, Poltergeist. He did Poltergeist.
Yes.
Yeah, Poltergeist.
Jerry Goldsmith. You can't really go. I mean, if you can't get John Williams, you go with Jerry Goldsmith probably.
Yeah. And you know what? They actually did that. The boss for Jurassic Park was Jerry Goldsmith. It wasn't John Williams. So there you go. You can't get John Williams. There you go.
Proof's in the pudding right there.
So to piggyback on what you were saying before, like really, really good use of camera angles, and what I really appreciated from that era is like they really captured the essence of like a comic book film, or comic books in general. Just certain still shots and stuff were just done so well, and like you could pause almost any frame of the movie and get something really cool. Just like pausing that, it's like you see that. All right, that's a comic book cover.
That
right
is really cool. Again, the framing, the view, the color, the shading, the lighting, the smoke use, the costuming, all that. I mean, even the face is kind of, again, he looks kind of the demon thing. He looks sort of like a man, but his face is a little odd. So that to me is like, it's like when you see a person, it looks like a person, but then they were scarred in some way. You kind of like, ooh, yeah. I mean, you don't look at them horrifically. You just kind of like, oh, that just kind of startled me. I wasn't, or like when you see a person like for myself, sometimes you see a person and they're missing a limb. You're like, you see the person, you're like, okay, all of a sudden he's missing an arm. You're like, oh, or his arm is, like he amputated, like he got part of an arm, and you just sort of like, oh, and it just kind of takes you aback for a moment because you're not seeing what you thought you saw.
Yes,
and this is kind of the same thing with The Shadow, because again, the whole premise of it is you don't really see him. He's in the shadow, and he is a shadow essentially.
Right.
And so, like at the very beginning, when he's fighting on the bridge, and you see sort of a glimpse of something, and people are like, I don't know what that is, and you see like a apparition type moving. Yeah, totally effective.
Yes, very, very good, very good. Like I said, like they captured like a comic book style and blended that with their noir style, because like I said, the use of shadows, no pun intended, but but yeah, like the use of shadows to do certain things and emphasize certain looks, just like this one here with Alec Baldwin, his main character, but just like certain things that they would do, and
the lighting across his eyes,
exactly,
and his eyes kind of glowing as he's trying to cloud men's minds.
Exactly. And I really appreciated that, like just the visuals. I thought that was really good. I think the effects were really good. Like it's hard to like. Some of them were iffy, but
until the end, maybe right at the end. But up to the ending part, yes. Ending with the battle with Khan, I'm like,
right, yeah, that one, yeah.
The fire scenes are cool, yeah. Those are all great, but that end bit, I'm like, because I was all on board until that end battle between the two of them. I'm like, oh, he made that well.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and that was one of the things that I was going to like talk about, like just like negative critique or whatever. But I would say the shadows effects, the effects of the shadow were actually really decent. And like I said, some of that wasn't even like they had Now the Sun Wants to Come Out. But yeah, some of the effects were like, it was just literally a shadow, but like just a shadow just appearing. I think they only had the one real shot where like he came out of the wall, and I was looking at it, I was like, I know they don't have it in HD, but I was looking, I was like, that still looked pretty good, especially for its time. I'm like, that,
right?
Yeah, if I saw that, just like, yeah, they played up on that really well, like played up on using the shadows and using those effects. So I think like when they had to show something, they did, and when they didn't have to, they used that, I think, really well. That maybe that had to do with budget. I'm sure Alec Baldwin cost a lot, as well as some of the other actors.
Well, he was hot. That was the time he was pretty hot. I think he did Beetlejuice in the later '80s, and I think he just did Hunt for Red October right before this film. So yeah, he was probably pulling down some pretty good coin, because Hunt for Red October was a real popular movie.
Yes.
And he was, starring opposite, like, was it Scott Glenn and Sean Connery? So
exactly,
just passed away.
Exactly.
So yeah, he would have had a good size check.
Yes, exactly.
Because I think he did, like I say, he did Beetlejuice like a few years before this, a few other films that were pretty popular. So he was a hot ticket item at that point, and I think he went to TV pretty much right after that, because I think he started out in TV. So, but yeah, hey, he was a good-looking guy. He's in shape.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know what this movie reminded me of? I think I told you this last time when we talked about this briefly. Is this movie is the live-action version of the animated Batman series?
Yep.
Because it looks like the animated Batman series.
Exactly.
Because I want to say they're in the 30s, I think, is what they are.
Right after
the
World
War I.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cars are great. The costumes are great, of course. Everything looks good. Of course, everybody's carrying a Tommy gun, Thompson submachine gun, because this was back in the 30s, like the gangsters would do. And I think this came out around the same time as the movies like Dick Tracy came out as well. So you had that kind of look about it too, with the colors and the sort of the bad guys looking a certain way. And I'll say John Lone as the Khan, as the bad guy Khan, that dude handed up like crazy, but man, he chewed up some scenes. But he has that, John Lone is a great actor who can really play about anything. And he's kind of very underrated. I know he played the Iceman in the movie Iceman. So he was in a lot of heavy makeup, but totally was able to pull that off. He played Madame Butterfly with the opposite Jeremy Irons as the woman who was not obviously a woman, and a few others. The Hunted with who was it? What's his name? Christopher Lambert, since he's French, and a few others like that. But he plays a really good bad guy. But John Lone has been in some great films like The Last Emperor of China. That's again, it's a gorgeous looking film. You if you see that, it's a long film. It's beautiful to look at. Nothing else. But yeah, John Lone literally just like takes over the scene. I mean, he's supposed to be like that because he's a descendant of the Khan. He's supposed to be because he wants to be,
right, exactly,
king of the world.
Exactly.
So he's supposed to be that way. But he's the actor who can actually pull that off. I think. And he's a very underrated actor.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree.
He had fun in this film. You definitely saw it. He had fun in this movie. That's all that matters.
So I would also say, like, for the most part, there was some decent acting. I did have, there were some weird line reads that I'm like, all right, was that a first take and you went with it or whatever? You're running low on time or something. You only had these actors for so it was just like, it was just really weird because like the only reason they really stood out was because, well, the acting had been pretty solid up till this point, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, why is it weird now? So
well, I mean,
for this they don't like one or two lines.
It depends on when they shot the scene too, because maybe they shot that scene earlier on when people were, saying like, oh, this is a cheesy comic book type movie. But then maybe the director said something later on, hey, let's tone it down a little bit. And maybe like you said, that was a better shot. Just because maybe they thought it looked good at the time, and it sounded good, but then it's like, no, maybe not.
Right.
But yeah, but it's a comic book movie. That's the thing, especially back then, because didn't Batman come out kind of right before this one?
This was 1994. Batman was 89. I think Batman Returns might have came out right before this one, or like alongside of it.
Okay. Right. Sure. Yeah, because it has that same feel about it. Like I said, it has that same feel about it. But those Batman movies were more modern settings, whereas this, like I said, is actually set back in the time of when the Shadow was, radio serial kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which again, I love because the music was cool, the cars were cool, the suits. I mean, all that was cool. And I love hey, if you have a movie with a pneumatic tube in it, I am 100% in. I mean, that pneumatic tube was awesome. I love that. My wife loves a pneumatic tube. I'm just being honest. If we could have a tube. She's like, we should install a tube to go places and send messages. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that idea too. That's probably why we're married.
It was all the pneumatic tubes. It's like these. You mentioned that, and it was just like
it's all about hydraulic pneumatic tubes.
It went on from there.
Yeah. We like going by the bank and looking at theirs. It's great.
And that's one of the things like I did appreciate, and like not only just visual wise, but plot wise, like using these certain mechanisms and using people. These people like that he's lives that he saved. It's like, all right, now you owe me, and he has all of these agents that's working with him and for him everywhere. So that makes a lot of what he does more plausible, because and people that know who he is, well, like they would understand like, okay, this is, to serve a greater good. And this is where I would probably say he has a leg up on Batman, because it's like, yes, I know that Batman is rich and wealthy and he does the whole Playboy thing. Same with Lamont Cranston, same with him. So he has the whole Playboy thing going.
They don't really talk about it, but yeah, he's wealthy.
Yeah, so like I do understand like he can keep some secrets to himself, but you have to wonder like, okay, he's after a while it's like you're going to need allies, and to get information to educate you on things that you are not educated on and stuff. And I guess the difference would be that, Bruce Wayne is a genius and Lamont's not really. So, but he does have...
Well, he's not a genius, but he uses his network of people to kind of put the right people in the right jobs.
Right.
Like he goes, when he saves the guy at the beginning, he contacts him later to get a metal analogy of the coin. So he's putting the right, and he's going to the right people. So it's almost like he doesn't know all the data, but it can find out where it, who knows it. Yes. So his network is great. So he's a good networking type person. And I also love the fact in this film, they use for the most part, they use the era's specific and appropriate technology, like the pneumatic tubes, and like he didn't have his own car. He didn't have any real gadgets, although he did have like secret compartments. But that's the thing. I mean, you know, castles built back in the 1100s have secret rooms. You know, I mean, so that's not anything, you know, far fetched. It's all appropriate into that kind of time, you know, kind of time frame and timeline. So it wasn't like in Batman where he has a, you know, bat jet and a bat boat and a bat car and then whatever, and you know, all these gadgets and stuff. It's just him using kind of a mystical way of getting things done,
right?
Which again is sort of the non-scientific part of it. But they kind of now, and honestly, the initial setup is a little odd in my opinion. Of this guy is going to teach him how to do this.
And that's one of the criticisms that I was actually going to get into. That's a little weird, but I did want to kind of picky, like, again, it's like keeping on that, like, okay, using these people to help him accomplish his goals or whatever, and realizing that like it's cool that these people actually realize that, you know, he's working towards something good or whatever. But there was a moment that you were talking about, like, you know, with secret compartments and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really appreciated is when he went into like that little alleyway, that little secret alleyway, flipped this little switch or whatever, all right, this opened this little compartment door. If you look down that alleyway while that door is open, you still can't really see it. And I was like, you know, you think about like, you know, the trope that you would see is like, all right, well, the brick would move. And then it's like, okay, if somebody was just walking by and it was just like, oh, hey, what's going on down there or whatever. It's like, even though like it opened, it still didn't really look like it was, you still didn't look like anything significant. So even he had left it open, it wouldn't catch people's eye or anything. It was just like,
because as soon as you walked in, I mean, the wall moved back. So if you look, you would just see a wall. And you're like, okay. You know, you know, I mean, buildings have recessed walls, and then there's a wall out front. That's fine. But then he walked down and then made a left turn and hit another switch, and then it went back.
Right.
So you wouldn't necessarily notice that. So you had, you know, kind of the secret, I don't know, sanctum or sanctuary or whatever you call it. I think called the sanctum. So you had that, which is cool. And of course, you had inside there, you had like a little secret compartment when he was there with the con, and he used the lever with his foot, and it was a gun, and he had the gun. You know, I was like, that's clever. So that's cool. I mean, but that's just real practical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth noting because I feel like a lot of movies, like, they don't think about these little details or whatever, like some stuff that's almost kind of taken for granted now, or that like you don't really think about all that much when you see the newer movies, but you have these, like, some of these older movies, like, just the level of detail that they would go into, just like, somebody thought of that. Somebody had to have thought of that, just been like, okay, this is going to be in an open area. Like, it's still an alleyway, yes, but, like, okay, if somebody were to just walk by, you know, like, you'd see this big open door, and all of a sudden it just closes in on itself. But it's like, even when he opened it, if you were to look down the alleyway, because they shot it in that you know, in a way that was like looking down the alley, I was like, still can't really see it all that much. And then it's like, well, is he just going into some back door somewhere? And even if you saw him walk in, it's like, oh, there's a back door back there, fine.
Yeah. You're like,
as a passerby, you're not going to notice anything. It's not going to catch your eye. And I'm just like, that's, you know, details like that I appreciate, you know, like the network of people that he's working with. I appreciate stuff like that. Like I said, that he gets information, he gets, you know, he has people's help, he has resources that he can call upon, you know, to do certain things or whatever, and still kind of maintain his anonymity to a certain degree, because, like, all right, he can go in and actually just talk to these people as Lamont. And it's just be like, oh, well, Lamont's he's wearing the ring, so
he's one of them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing is, I don't know much about the character specifics other than the film I saw, and a little bit of the radio kind of thing of where it became famous. But he's, from my understanding, he's not a famous person like, say, Bruce Wayne is, because Bruce Wayne's from an old family, and there's a history of his parents getting killed, and he has he owns these companies. As from my understanding, he's just a wealthy dude. Like, I mean, it's just like a dude you'd see on the street, like driving a Tesla. You wouldn't know that he's very famous other than he looks like his guy has a nice car. And so in that regard, you know, most people would just say, oh, it's just a guy in a suit.
Right.
It's just a dude.
Right.
You know, not like, oh, isn't that George Clooney, or, oh, isn't that Brad Pitt? You know, or isn't that, you know, Tesla guy, or the, you know, Elon Musk or whatever.
Right.
Because he's not anybody super famous.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's always in the paper, kind of like Bruce Wayne would be, always in the
Right.
paper, this Russian supermodel or something.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, you're like, all right, cool. Now the one thing I did say, I will say that the little rings, when they would glow, that's a little bit of the technology outside of the norm, I would think. Because I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, that's a little bit that takes you out of it a little bit.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, these glow. Why do they glow? How does this happen?
Yeah. How does that happen? I don't know.
And apparently,
I mean, the Dick Tracy wristwatch was a little bit more realistic because obviously we have those now.
Exactly.
Even though it's a little bit before its time, but it's still kind of like okay.
Yeah. I think overall, there are some elements like we just got into one right there, but like overall, I think the story is pretty decent. I did like no major plot holes or anything like that. I was like able to follow everything. Everything seemed to flow. The only thing and I would say this, like the action is good quite a few times, but there are like going into like some of the negative criticisms. There are times where it gets a little bit hokey, like he'd be shooting somebody and they go flying, and it's just like I'm like, okay, and it's just like bullets don't work like that, So it's like little things like that, like knocking people into flips and whatever. And I'm just like, okay,
right.
All right.
Well, and again, I want to say, was it at the end, that battle between Khan and the Shadow? That was I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And the other part, what was it? The chasing of the doomsday device of them chasing it around the building.
Yes. Yeah, very silly. Very like they're just they're chasing it. All of a sudden, it's chasing them now, and it's just like okay.
It's like a Scooby-Doo. It's like Scooby-Doo. It's fun.
Yeah,
but that's just kind of like And that's the other thing is like, so this the building wasn't torn down. The Khan clouded people's minds, so the whole city really just didn't even think there was a building there. It was an empty lot.
Right.
But then apparently he had installed on there a rotating floor, I guess. I don't know. It's like, or maybe the hotel already had it. I'm like,
maybe. I was like, oh, you're not going to pay your bill, huh? Okay, I got you.
I'll take good thing to put in a rotating, tilting floor, and this is what I wanted. It's not like
and like there's stuff. It's so interesting, like because there's stuff I'm like, okay, yeah, this is grounded for the most part, like especially like just realizing that the Shadow, even though he does have these powers, like there's still a sense of mortality to him. He can get shot.
He can get shot, get stabbed. Yeah.
And then they'll do something like that where it's just like, okay, what? it kind of throws off the tone of the movie for it. It is even just for like a few seconds, but it's just like,
right,
really, and I would say the villain, even though he was well played, I would say he probably deserved a bit more development because, he's one of those, yes, he is a descendant of Khan, but he's also a failed student or a rogue student from the same school that, that Lamont went to in Tibet, I think it's Tibet. And it was like, okay, he's a rogue student, but it was like, man, it would have been nice to kind of see like, why, just kind of understand him a little bit more, other than just like, okay, I'm a descendant of Khan, I'm going to take over the world, and be the ruler like Khan wanted to be. And it was like, okay, but Genghis Khan, I get you're a different person. I think you need a little bit, we need a little bit more meat on his bones. Like I said, played well. Just you get to where like, okay, generic super villain at this point or whatever. And he was stronger than Lamont or the Shadow at certain points. So we're just like, okay, it was actually good. And that's where we get into like,
he was able to tame the magic dagger creature thing,
and he had more.
He actually had it, and
had more discipline.
But the other thing that we talked about is like, but why would this enlightened person pick Lamont Cranston, who's like not a really nice person?
Thank you, and that was going to get into my next one. Where it's just like, why Lamont? Why him?
Special powers after he's like shown how brutally horrific he's been in the past 7 years.
Yeah, and then they go in and And what they do is they tell you that, oh, you're actually a really decent person. Is he?
Yeah, like,
I mean, he just like we just got through watching a scene where like he said like, oh, you were like a father to me. He tells his henchman, shoot through him. And it's just like, but he's like, oh, we're going to give you, because you want to redeem yourself. Like, I haven't seen anything to that. I'm just like, okay, yeah, he's good as the Shadow now, but it's like, you skipped over quite a bit here to get to where like you felt like this person deserved to have this power and could use it for good, because I'm like, just looking at his actions at the beginning of the movie is like, it almost felt like he would be the rogue, that the person that you taught these powers to, and go
would be the
exactly. That would have been an interesting twist. But
I would say if they did a remake, then what you got to do is you got to flesh out the character a little more. It's like maybe I don't know, maybe something happens and he, I don't know, like a child or something that taps into his, like regret or something. And, either he saves a child or he sees something like a puppy dog get hurt or killed or something. And it just breaks him or something, And so that way it kind of leads him back to the proper path, but he doesn't know how to do it.
Exactly.
And then he's kind of like a lost soul. Then the guru from up on high mountain could come and whisk him away to say, yes, you know what darkness lies in the hearts of men's souls and the shadows of their being. But you also know, you haven't lost the light within you. Let me help, kind of flame those embers to become a beacon of light that you can save other, lost souls.
Yes.
And redeem them, like, I'm redeeming you. And so basically have the guru maybe sending out shadow-like people who maybe not to his extent, because maybe like in Doctor Strange, is like, this guy's really good. And so Lamont Cranston was like one of his best students. Who actually was able to do these shows. There was other people are good students, and they're out there doing nice things, like Mother Teresa. Yeah, and tie in like Mother Teresa was a student. Just tie like Martin Luther King was a student. And they kind of tie it in would be kind of fun. And that way you kind of like wink to us and stuff.
Right.
So that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And that was kind of like one of my last negatives was like, okay, we're talking about like, okay, why him? But you could use, because there are moments in here where you can like, they hint at his inner turmoil. Like he's having the dream that what's her name? I know her real name, Penelope Ann Miller.
Penelope Ann Miller, yeah.
But like her character, you have the dream. She's able to go into his mind and see what's going on in his dreams. And also like the dream that he has where he's like, he tears off his skin and he's Genghis or he's Chiwan Khan, like, and it kind of like, okay, hints at like he feels inside like I'm no better than this guy, like he was somebody that idolized me for the brutality that I had done, and it's like, okay, I get that. But I'm like, you needed some more to really kind of flesh this guy out. And I think that kind of leads into like, my whole thing on if you were going to remake this, either make it a longer movie or make it a series. I'm kind of leaning more towards longer movies since like, they like, I guess it would kind of like fall into like Batman Begins territory or whatever. And it's like, you kind of see the descent of Bruce Wayne throughout. Now it's told, non-linear because, it's flashbacks and stuff like that, but you don't have to do it that way with the Shadow. Like you could do it in a linear progression. It's like, okay, you actually just see his descent and you see him go down this dark path, even though he does have this sense of humanity and light in him. Is like the things that he's doing are bad, but he's doing them because like maybe he just feels like there's nothing else left for me at this particular point or whatever. So like something to that degree where it's like you could really flesh this guy out a whole lot more, because I think Alec Baldwin did a good job in the role. He did a really good job in the role and everything.
Yeah.
They when it came to the Shadow, like cutting out that first part of the movie, like where they show like, okay, like the origin rather, but it's like, all right, when it came to the shadow, they did like after the whole 7-year skip, that was good, but it's just like, all right, you kind of rush this first part along where you say, you get to that, you start asking questions like, well, why you? Well, what have you done to show that you actually have this inner turmoil that you're dealing with or whatever, that you might actually be a good person under the guise of a bad guy or whatever. So,
well, that's what I was going to say is, honestly, I'll have to disagree with you on this, is that instead of a movie, they probably do need to do like a Netflix or a Prime kind of series, because you need to, like you said, flesh out the guy more. Because like if you look at, say, Iron Fist off of Netflix, for example, he's not really well known unless you've read those 70s comic books and stuff, and then of course past that point. Right. Whereas the Shadow is from the 30s or maybe even 20s or 30s,
maybe 20s,
so not a lot of people really know about him unless you read some of the esoteric comics way back, and of course there's more modern uptakes of him too, but you really, I would almost say that the first like maybe hour-long episode, if you say you did a series of hour-long episodes, the first would be like at the very end, he would erupt and become the Shadow. Like he trains, or he kind of like the Iron Fist guy who is plane crash in the mountains. He learned the ways of the Iron Fist up in the Tibetan, the Himalayan mountains, what have you. And so he does kind of the similar type story of, maybe he falls into the way of something bad after, either, the Boxer Rebellion in China or something, and he kind of gets on, the warlord side of it. And then, maybe at night, he's like a bad guy in front of everybody. But at night, maybe he's broken and he's in turmoil. And that would be the kind of the thing. And then that, enlightened man on the mountain, guru, would feel his pain and then send the guys to bring him back, because he wants to be saved and redeemed, but he doesn't know how, because he's gotten himself so lost in the shadows. You can kind of tie it in that way. You're lost in the shadows and you don't know where to find the light. Let me help you. And so he's initially, like I've got all this power, but inside of him, that last little spark is like, but I don't want to die. And he feels himself kind of giving up, and he doesn't want to do that. So then he kind of pushes past it, even though he's still kind of battling with the bad things he did, of course, you could say that kind of thing. And so then at the very end, maybe something happens and he uses where he goes back to New York and he uses the special powers to save somebody, and he feels so good about it. And then you go from that point on. I think, honestly, that would be a really cool, especially today in modern with all this crazy stuff going on. I really think if you might have to modernize it, but I don't think you necessarily would have to, but you could. So I don't know. I mean, because in the Shadow, like imagine, if it's a modern version and people like, can you describe the guy that you saw? Well, he was kind of like, he had like a really long coat on and he had this big hat. I mean, you kind of describe a guy from the 40s or the 30s. It's like, he was wearing like a fedora and a, like, well, yeah, he was. Yeah. I was like, everybody's like, what? Like, what? And then maybe like maybe as he's describing like the first description to the cop, and then the cop, looks behind the guy and he sees like a business suit mannequin dressed up very much like the same guy. Like, okay, buddy, okay, yeah, we'll get that on.
Thanks for watching until the end, fellow Nerd Posse. If you stuck around this long, it means that we own your soul, and the only way to get it back is to click that subscribe button, leave a like or dislike, and comment down below. If you want to watch the full video, check us out on McBlamEntertainment.com, or for the audio version, just simply look us up on your favorite podcasting app. Follow us on social media, the links are in the description down below, and if you feel ever so kind, you can support us on Patreon or Subscribestar for as little as $1 a month and gain access to our Discord server where we talk about all sorts of nerdy stuff. Thanks again for watching, and depending on what time of day you're watching, have a good morning, have a good day, and have a good night, and we will see you in the next video.